This how-to on repairing crash damage comes courtesy of me showing off for my new camera. I got way too confident in the Valiant and was flying it low and slow and got caught in a little bit of wind and not paying attention apparently. Whatever the combination of problems were, it was still my fault, and now we got damage that we have to repair, but you get a how-to story out of it. Even the best props in the world, and I consider best to be just that, can't stand up to a crash, and I smushed this one big time. Even my polished aluminum spinner came out of this pretty good. It needs some more buffing, but it was fine to go back on the plane. The cowl already had a little damage from an earlier incident. This time it came through just fine. I suspect that's because I have a brand new cowl sitting on the bench that I can replace it with if this one does get damaged. Anytime the wing of a high-wing aircraft touches the ground, we need to look at this cabin area very closely. I went over this area several times over the coming days and couldn't find a thing wrong with it. It's hard to see here, but the wing tube does have a little bulge in it where the tube flexed, so we got to replace this. The tail feathers didn't take any big hits, but this part of an airplane is usually pretty weak, but these stood up just fine. We couldn't find any damage at all. From a distance, the tail section looked fine, but when we got closer, you could see that there was a problem. That wrinkle in the covering along the bottom edge shows that there's some damage inside. Another distortion of the covering above that shows that we got damage up there as well. In the end, it's the only real damages that we found. Because we killed the prop, I pulled the cowl and wanted to check the engine mounts and the front end of the fuselage. This time, all of that seemed real solid. I had no problems up here. I knew I had to remove this covering, so I took my heat iron and sealed the covering down to the structure around the area that I had to remove. That'll make patching it up later a lot easier. Then with the fresh blade and the knife, I could open up that bay and get rid of that covering. And now we get to see the real extent of the damage, and this really isn't all that bad. We can make a good solid repair here and not add hardly any weight to the plane. To make sure that we keep the airframe nice and rigid, I'm going to epoxy these popsicle sticks to the inside of both the top and sides of this crack. These sticks are light, tough, and they epoxy in very well. With the popsicle stick loaded with epoxy, I hold it to the inner side and use these little clamps to press everything together. I've already CA'd some of this joint back together, so I know it's still straight. Adding these popsicle sticks with the epoxy spreads the joint out over a much bigger area and gives us a lot of strength. I put one popsicle stick across the top and then one across the side of this joint. And we'll do exactly the same thing on the bottom damage. I've already added a new piece of covering to the bottom of the plane. I'm using the iron to make sure all its edges are sealed down well. Every time I try and fix covering, it's at this point where I think I've really screwed this up. And as compared to somebody that really knows what they're doing, I probably did mess it up. I've learned to withhold judgment on my own work until after I shrink the covering down. After shrinking the covering down, even my repairs are looking sort of decent. And here's the top after I've shrunk that side down. Now that it looks pretty decent, we need to take it out to the field and see if it still flies and that the tail stays on. This is the first flight since doing the repairs. As soon as it gets off the ground, I let go of the sticks. And it flies great. I didn't even have to make any trim changes. I had measured everything up and it looks straight, but you never know until you get it in the air and see how it flies. Every now and then to make a slow pass so everybody can see that you can't see my repairs. This time I decided to get on the gas and let's put a little strain on the tail section. The Valiant has large elevators and are going to put a lot of strain on the tail section when you go through fast maneuvers like this. Even faked out the camera. No problem with the repairs so far. Then I decided to take it up and see how it acts in a spin, because this plane spins really well. And no problems. Everything else felt good, so I put the flaps down and decided we'll see how it feels flying real slow. This is what got me in trouble last time, but it was a lot windier than it is today. But here too, the controls all felt just like they did before. When sliding the plane around with the rudder, I can't tell any difference in how the control feels between now and before. After I convinced myself that the tail section was good and strong, I decided to do a couple of dozen touch and goes, and everything held up just fine. The Valiant is one of the best handling airframes made, and I'm glad to see that the repairs haven't changed that.